Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the fifth edition of State of Thunder, our bi-weekly session where we talk about desktop and mobile development, where we share things on how it works behind the scenes and give you a chance to ask all those questions and figure out how you can be a part of it. In volume one, we began with an overview of the desktop roadmap and covering what we're working on and why. And since then, it seems like we've been kind of digging into the specifics more and more. So last time, Alex walked us through how do we prioritize features and what it really means when something is marked as P1. And today, I'd like to continue on that thread. Once a feature is prioritized, how does it actually go from planning to completion? So Toby here, he leads the desktop team at MZLA, and I asked him to walk us through exactly that process. So Toby, how does it actually work?
We shall see. Yeah. Thanks, Philip. So yeah, I'm Toby Pilling, and I manage the desktop team, and we're largely responsible for all of those delicate surgical operations that are constantly taking place, like in the application, fixing issues, and improving the product. I guess it's the swarm of Bugzilla. But aside from that, and on top of that, this team balances working on new features and enhancements that have been the theme of some of the previous talks. So I figured we could cover some of that now. I'll share my screen. As Philip mentioned last time, Alessandro spoke about the prioritization and shared some of the roadmap with you. And just a quick reminder that you can find that roadmap, the URL there. And if you were watching last time, you might recall some of those items that we spoke about and have some of those P1 items in mind. So I'm going to cover a couple of them and I thought it might be worth sharing a little more detail about some of them. So I've selected one that's at the beginning of our process, one at the midpoint, and then one that's almost at the end, just to cover off some of the considerations that we have at the various stages of planning. So first up is a front-end project that that we mentioned, and that's the calendar UI rebuild. And Alessandro mentioned in the previous session, we've had a fair amount of feedback from users that some parts of the application still feel quite aged. And while the mail space has received a lot of attention, and is in pretty good shape, the calendar was left to stagnate. So if I just share things, what it looks like now. We're going from something that looks like this and trying to make it look a little bit like this. And how do we do that? This is just one of the elements. And just wanted to give you a sense of where we're heading with it. So how do we begin on a project that's been identified as a priority? Beyond choosing an appropriate team, which is something that we would have to do as a business, there are often things to consider before we actually dive into the code. With any project, whether it's landscaping or a house build or a big development project, we got to break things down into functional milestones. And because this is largely it's like a front end initiative, we decided to base those milestones on some of the major visual elements that we're considering. And so for us in the calendar rebuild project, we've got 7 or 8 milestones. And within each of those milestones, we've broken those up into epics and tasks, which get assigned to people and get associated with dates. And from there, we manage the work. There are often multiple ways to dive into things. And one interesting thing about this particular project was we were trying to figure out whether it would be worthwhile starting from scratch, creating the actual calendar layout in a totally separate area, and then building the blocks on top of that. So going from the calendar view to then the dialogues that are fed from that view. But what we realized there is that if we did that, we can't really release things piece by piece. And one of the important aspects of doing that is that if we build and start with let's say the read dialog, which is where we actually did begin, what it means is we can tie that into existing functionality, and behind a pref, we can enable that piece of functionality and integrate it into the existing code. So that gives our QA team an early start. It gives users who are feeling brave an early start on testing things out, and means that we can gradually over time roll this out. The code lives among the code base for a longer period of time. It means when we're introducing it all at once, it doesn't break a lot of things. So that's the way we decided to do things with this particular project, and started off with the event read dialog. And that's at the stage now where you can turn it on and start interacting with it. And that gives us this long runway of being able to take things piece by piece and make sure it's working. So as you can probably see from this milestone here, we're a good chunk of the way through it. And one of the benefits there is that all of the foundational pieces and that come along with the event read dialog, so the positioning, the sizing, the colors, the styles, the objects that come part of this particular piece will then get reused. So this initial piece might be a little bit slower, but the pieces following this will roll out a lot faster. So the next piece that I'll share with you is the first time user experience. And that I will just put up screen there. This was designated as a P1 because of its obvious impact on the user experience. As you may know, like a bad first impression takes a long time to shake off. What the most complex pieces of this particular project were the various flows that comprise the email account setup. And as you can see now, that has been finished and completed and released to daily users. So on top of those initial milestones, we have, the polished styles, the layouts that's been tested. So the secondary piece that we're looking at developing now is the first time user experience for adding address book items. And when you add your account to the address book, there'll be a similar flow that works as I showed you with the email. And at this stage of the project, I guess our challenges become a little bit more strategic in terms of resource management and timing. Do we keep a full team working on this to try and finish it off sooner, or do we reserve a key player to power through the bulk of the work and have other team members support in terms of code reviews and finishing things off? Do we aim for the entire process to launch together, or do we release the calendar account hub together with the rejuvenated calendar UI, and then release the email and address book account hub experiences together in ESR? So we've decided to aim for a launch of the email and address book in our 140 release, which is coming up quite soon and hits the majority of users the first few weeks of July. And we're having one of our more experienced team members who's run most of this project, who's broken the back on this, and will continue with support of the team. The last project that I'm going to get to is our EWS project, which is a back-end project. We have two main priorities that we're currently working on building in parallel. Those are the global message database, which powers Conversation View, and also providing support for Exchange web services. And I think Alessandro mentioned in his last session that our preference is to work on more than one project at a time. We found in a lot of cases the research learning and changes from one project can benefit another. And it also just means that the team benefits from a bit of a break away from one project to step into something unrelated and have a break. So while we do have team members that are working on multiple initiatives, the core of this team working on EWS has been working on it for some time. So I'll talk about that a little bit and provide some history and context for the priority. Whenever we're at a conference or event, we receive a ton of feedback about the Exchange support, and now we're on the home stretch at the moment and looking forward to releasing it quite soon. So how do we decide when to release and what to release is more the things that we consider towards the end of a project. We can't really keep up with our competitors to the degree where we can just say, okay, feature parity is our goal, because the goalposts are always moving and our team is small, albeit mighty. So what we're looking at doing in this particular project is considering that the majority of the features that we have at the moment is going to be good enough to release to the audiences that we're serving. We have an extended support release, a monthly, a beta, and a daily. While we may not be ready to roll this particular piece of functionality out to ESR, we're hoping that we will be able to persuade some users to jump in to the monthly release and get benefit to this immediately. And so those are some of the considerations towards the end of the project, and fingers crossed that this gets out to everybody quite soon, and allows us to work on the bugs as they come in, rather than launching all at once and then having to deal with the onslaught of many problems. So yeah, that kind of covers some of the considerations that we have for projects on desktop at the various stages. We can talk more about how we resource and how we decide who's going to be working on which adventure as part of the projects, if need be. But yeah, I'll leave it there and see if there are any questions related to any of these projects or some of the strategies that we use to dive into the work.
So I have a question maybe then. If someone is really excited about something they see on the roadmap or one of these projects and they want to be a part of those plans, what's a good way for them to be involved in that?
I suppose you're talking about external contributors when you're referencing that. Yeah, that's a great point. And we've had some of those things spring up in a couple of the projects that I've mentioned today. One that comes to mind is in the EWS project, someone mentioned that certain parts of the functionality on their version of Exchange wasn't available in the code base that we had already released, and suggested that they could perhaps help us test or contribute. And we're very much welcoming that kind of offer. And we have onboarding materials and a person dedicated to helping support external contributors. Developer relations is key to this, and making people feel supported. So not only will we spare the time to help that person get started, but also share some of our learnings and invite them into some shared coding sessions to help us. I mean, in the end, we're going to increase the size of our team if we have someone helping with a feature or two, or even testing. So Ryan's been helping us do some of the testing over the last little while. And we have had other contributors participate in some of these projects beyond the swarm of Bugzilla.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think it's always a great opportunity and kind of, looking forward also. I love it when someone really understands, okay, this is what we're doing and why, and kind of tries to find their niche within that of, okay, hey, this is a certain way I use calendar, and looks like that's not quite represented in the event dialog yet. So maybe this is something that I can contribute to that goal of a new calendar dialog. So I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
good
and
opportunities
there
in
are things
that.
we put later on in our roadmap, or
Yeah.
the work gets pushed out, some of the polish items, but you may find that some of those polish items are very important to a certain business or enterprise or user, and we're very much open to adjusting things if we have a little bit of support to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to add that if I if I learn of a potential contributor that has filed a bug that might be kind of an easy fix that we can handhold to get there, then I'm always happy to step in and do that shepherding. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to let me know, like, hey, there's this person in the space where you're not exactly watching, that seems like they might be a good contributor, let me know, and I will definitely reach out to them to see how I can help.
I will say I did some live testing of the EWS account setup again while we're on this call, and everything is working correctly. So you passed the test today. Good job, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, there are some changes related to the account hub that were brought up with after some of your testing and investigation into how some servers behave in some circumstances in terms of auto discovery. So there's minor changes to the account hub for email coming up after we tackle some of the back end intricacies. So it's not quite finalized, but almost there.
Guess a related question to that, how do you handle situations where plans need to change? I don't know, either delays or something super unexpected coming up, or, just a trade-off that you need to make during implementation that doesn't match with what you planned.
Luckily, we're somewhat used to that on a weekly basis. It does, whether it's within the specific code base that we're working on or the project, or we get some upstream change that entirely takes the team away from what we're currently working on onto something else. We are fairly nimble and can adjust our workflows according to whatever comes up, and constantly evaluating what needs to be a priority. We don't just prioritize at the beginning and set sail and off we go. What we typically do is the milestones get a cadence and an order, and within there we're fairly bare bones on the items that exist within each milestone, and we only really put a lot of the flesh on the bone when we actually get to work on the specific milestone. And in some cases, we'll plan for work to be part of a milestone, and it will become obvious to us that it's more logically grouped with other items in other milestones. And so those can easily be moved in and out. So that's, part of my job is deciding where things live and when they should be tackled, and reprioritizing on a weekly basis. Happens quite a bit. I'm sure it happens on mobile too.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have that on mobile too. I think there's a lot of surprises in the code base, and sometimes that frustrating experience of, well, let's fix this thing, and then you get into here's another thing and another thing and another thing that we should do first to do it exactly right. So really trying to figure out that balance of, okay, should we take a shortcut now, or is that going to bite us later? But in the end, I think the most important thing is that we have happy users that have a high quality project. So personally, I'm willing to make that bet and say, okay, we can take this moment to do it right, and then focus on good quality.
Exactly. One example of that is the calendar that we were working on. We had the designs, we implemented a lot of the core functionality for the event dialogue, and then as we start interacting with it, we realize that there are better ways of doing things. And do we let this slide and get to those polish items later, or is it better to just do it now and feel like we're giving it our all in this moment? And in this particular case, we decided now is the right time to get it right. And often you don't realize those things unless you start interacting with it. It may seem perfect on paper or kind of in design, but once the interactions start, you begin to realize, oh no, we need to pause. Let's not dive into the next milestone until we're really happy with this one. But as you said, that could go on forever, and you have to realize this is good enough, and we'll get to some of the lower priority items later on in a second round.
Yeah. For the event dialog, can I turn that on in daily today if I want to?
You can turn that on in daily. Yes, I can share a pref. It's all of the data does not yet load, and some of the pieces are missing, but that is part of our plan. You know, we
Oh,
have
cool.
a QA team that needs to be interacting with all of these small items. You know, you may think that the event read dialog is a small item, but within there are so many minor components that we're
Mhm.
testing on various platforms. So having that ability to turn that flag on and start interacting with it is fairly important for us. And
Yeah.
yes, it will not only open an event dialog, but some of the data will be loaded in, but just don't expect all of
Yeah.
it to be ready in probably looking at another two weeks or so.
Oh yeah. Well, that's not too far off. But
Yeah.
hey, it's daily, so this is what testing is
That's
for.
right. That's what Daily's about. Yeah, and it's good. This one's taken a little bit longer, but as I said, you know, that frame that will get reused for the create and editing dialogue, all of the placement, the sizing, all of those things get reused. So we have to get this first one right and make sure it's thoroughly tested and
Nice.
the frameworks are there before we move on to something else. But yeah, when we do move on to something else, a lot of those components get reused and it's smoother sailing.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Heading on to some community questions. You mentioned that sometimes you have to drop everything and move on something that's coming in from the platform side. But
Mhm.
sometimes there's also a few cool things happening on the platform side. So for example, the Firefox profile management feature that just makes that profile startup a lot nicer to deal with. And there's a bunch of other features like tracking protection and translations and reader view and screenshots where Mozilla has done a lot of the work on the platform side. And the community was wondering if, what were plans around that? Are there things on from that bucket that you might kind of squeeze into the roadmap, or is it really, do we have to wait till next year?
Though the right answer probably will be provided by Alessandro. He's not around, but from from my observation and from the way we've spoken in the past, the roadmap that has been published is not set in stone. And there are things that we don't get to hear about until later in the year after this has been published. And they will, those items, such as the profile management feature,
Mm,
has been prioritized and probably will make it into this document at some point. So yeah, we're
right.
constantly evaluating how our users can benefit from upstream changes and the cool things that we inherit.
Yeah.
And with sometimes minor, sometimes fairly major support from our team, we can roll that out with, somewhat little effort. And that
Mhm.
is the plan, to strategically think about the ones that will benefit our users. And if it means taking something off course and rolling some P2 feature out a little bit later, that is definitely part of the plan, and something I've spoken to Alessandro about previously.
Yeah. Is
Yeah,
that
there's
maybe
some
also
really cool.
something where a contributor could say, hey, Firefox translations, that seems fairly secluded. Maybe I can kind of put that into Thunderbird, or is that something where we should talk about like the usefulness and product features first?
If a contributor is willing to work on something, we're always open to discuss it, and we have team
Mm.
members that are specialists in those areas and can partner up and provide support with planning, and in some cases provide support in coding and
Yeah.
certainly obviously in reviewing. But those are things that we're hoping will happen as we publish these items and more people get to hear about it. We're definitely open to support from the community.
Sounds good. Ryan, I'd also be interested in your take on this, like just from the higher kind of product level perspective.
Yeah.
For something that someone really just wants to get in, are there cases where you might say, yeah, well, maybe not that one?
Well, other cases, what I say might differ from what the rest of the team would say. But I think that if somebody's really passionate about these things, and DNS over HTTPS has been a topic for a few years now, if folks really want to see that get into the product, we're always open to somebody championing that and doing the work to make it so that it works in our context. And I think ones like that are kind of quick, not quick hit necessarily, but because the work is already in the platform, it just means working with our team to make it work in our context and to behave properly and be discoverable and all that. So I think any of these, tracking protection is another one, which, there might be a broader story there, but I think it's a great place for folks to plug in and engage with us if they're really passionate about this, and they can accelerate that timeline of getting those features in by grabbing them and championing them. Some of them, like Firefox Monitor, are more complicated because Monitor isn't an open source project. It's got a service component to it, and that's one where I think there are interesting conversations that have happened in the past about how that product might integrate, but it's not on the roadmap. And additionally, the modern tabs, which is listed there and it calls out vertical tabs and previews, is something that I know Alex has talked about before, integrating in. So I think it will happen eventually, but it's not planned for this year. So that's one I think people will have to wait for. Did I answer that question, or did I just dance around it?
No, I think that covers it pretty good. Covers both aspects.
Well,
Yeah, and
actually, I'll
I
have something to add to that, is that there's some items, features that we know that we're going to get to eventually, and a contributor will offer to do it sooner for us. And sometimes that's very difficult for us to agree to, because the way it might be done in a short term doesn't necessarily align with the things that we're planning to integrate it with a year from now. But one that came in over the last couple of months was the ability to sort folders manually. And while we were hoping to get to that eventually and put it in together with a whole bunch of other changes, it was deemed to be a feature that is important to a lot of users. And the contributor that was offering to do this work had a good sense of what needed to be done as a bare minimum. We added support from a number of team members and reviewed it and improved on what was provided. And that's going to be rolling out to ESR now. So we're very much open to those kind of improvements.
Very cool. Another question that came in was on another prior roadmap feature. What is the status of Thunderbird Sync? It was not included in any of the 2025 roadmaps and was originally supposed to be included in Thunderbird 115. And there's been a long troubling history on Thunderbird Sync, but maybe someone has a good answer to that.
I do. Not everyone has kept up with the blow by blow, but when we originally rolled out the feature, we were using the Firefox Sync infrastructure. And after some conversations, we both the Firefox team and us decided that wasn't the appropriate infrastructure to use for this feature. So as a result, and that was right before 115 release that we came to that conclusion. So since then, we've been working on setting up that infrastructure in our own environment, and then creating the different layers needed to support that feature. And to do it right, it takes time. And I've spoken about this before with our community. It's also something that up until recently, the Thunderbird team didn't really do. We ran add-ons.thunderbird.net, but we didn't have a lot of extra infrastructure that we managed. And so scaling up in order to support that and to do that in the right way, and being really deliberate about how we roll that out and how we set it up for long-term success, takes more planning than just connecting to Firefox Sync infrastructure. So it's not a very, I guess, fun answer, but the answer is that we're still working out all of the open questions and getting that, running. One thing too that folks have to, and they can go check out the repo, the Sync repo. Sync was never designed to support another application. It was designed for Firefox by Firefox. And so there are some parts of it that we've had to kind of walk through and better understand, and we'll likely have to change to support our own environment. So I expect it to be at least testing infrastructure once again online before the end of this year. And then I would expect next ESR for people to actually be able to use something. But we'll update folks as we bring that online and really start working with it. Toby, did you have anything additional to add there?
No, not on that one. No, we the changes for the desktop application are, while they're significant, I think the larger pieces are at the structural layer and server side.
Yeah, and Philip, you might have something to add there too, because just because we bring
Yeah.
Sync online doesn't mean it connects to, say, the mobile client on day one.
Definitely, yeah. We had this conversation leading up to the initial release of Thunderbird for Android. I did want some way for people to go from desktop to this new mobile client, or, if they already have K9 Mail installed, from K9 to Thunderbird for Android. And Sync would have been a solution for that. This way you can have your accounts on all your devices. And we did some investigation, also an initial proof of concept for that. But then since we decided we're not going to take that path, we went with the alternative. And the alternative is actually pretty cool. Being able to import via QR code, not having to use any third-party infrastructure, even if it is end-to-end encrypted, just immediately getting your accounts onto your device really fits well with that mobile use case. So far, the feedback's been good. A few small issues here and there on being able to read the QR code with all the camera models that Android has to offer. But I'm really happy about how that turned out.
And I guess it might be worth backing up for folks who have never heard of this before and are just learning about it now on our podcast feed or on YouTube. That sync infrastructure, that sync service is Firefox Sync, that we're going to call Thunderbird Sync in our context. And that allows you to sync your settings between, in our case, Thunderbird email clients, end-to-end encrypted. And so a lot of folks have asked for that. A lot of folks want that type of thing so that they can move seamlessly and set up an account on desktop, have it reflected on, well, another desktop or laptop or whatever, and also on their mobile devices. And we'd like to get there. But right now, folks can do that between mobile and desktop via the QR codes.
Yeah, sounds good. You briefly mentioned add-ons a short while back. Do you have an update maybe on the schedule of revamping the add-ons website? No, it looks very much like the older add-ons Mozilla org right now, and I know there's some work in progress.
Yeah, we've been updating it to Python 3 for developers. It's Python 2 application. And that work is going pretty well. I don't have an end date yet, but maybe by the next Days of Thunder I will. And at that point, I think will be a time to look at how do we change the front end, and what do we want to change about how ATN at add-ons.thunderbird.net works. So right now there's just a lot of plumbing going on in the background, and once the backend is built on a more modern architecture, then we'll move to the user experience side of that.
Yeah, I guess, related question that might come up to that, why don't we just kind of take the add-ons Thunderbird, add-ons Mozilla org code base and just go to the latest version? And I think that kind of the answer is the same thing that you mentioned just recently, that add-ons Mozilla org was built for Mozilla add-ons and Firefox and all of the specifics on that. I think they've done a great job in kind of splitting things up a little bit more to have a back end and a front end over the past many years, but still, it's not as easy as just kind of taking the latest version and just, renaming it to Thunderbird.
Yeah, you probably know more about this than most of us, Philip, having been on the add-ons team
Yeah,
over the corporation. But the my understanding is that we've diverged a little too much at this point. So we can't just take the changes
yeah,
and slap them in. We have to kind of update
yeah.
our environment first.
Yeah, I know that we did a bunch of infrastructure changes as well to use, different systems than Solar Corporation had been using, and I think that gave us a big win in terms of infrastructure cost that we can then divert to other efforts. And yeah, I think in the end, we need some way to show the add-ons that we want to feature and make available to Thunderbird. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something as heavy as the add-ons front end and back end that we have on the Moco side. So going back to another question about contributing to the community and the wider ecosystem around Thunderbird. Um, what are the things that MZLA or community members are doing to impact that wider ecosystem in terms of, working on open standards, making email more accessible and transparent to others, kind of trying to tear down some of those walls that we have in the proprietary services?
Yeah, the in the past, and you can speak to this too, Philip, we've engaged with CalConnect and some other standards bodies that goes back even further beyond, my history here.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking about this question before the call quite a bit because I knew it was in the list. The way I kind of think about it is it's about time to get back to engaging more productively with standards bodies. It's not that we stopped getting questions or stopped having people reach out to engage with us and get our perspective on things. But frankly, up until probably last year, we didn't really have a lot of extra bandwidth. I mean, we still don't have a lot of extra bandwidth, to be clear, but we certainly didn't have a lot of bandwidth to engage in the way we'd like to. And so now folks probably know that the servers that we've spun up for Thundermail are JMap. The obviously we're doing a lot of work on calendar that's on the roadmap that Toby was talking about earlier. There are a lot of areas around these standards where we can engage, and I think it's important that we do that more frequently to try to move these standards forward. One of my biggest complaints about the state of email is that Gmail is moving so far. They're moving a lot of these features that should just be a part of the standard. It's just Gmail and behind the API. And there's a lot of innovation that's happening there, but it's not happening for the standard as a whole. And so I think it's on us to try to push these standards forward. For instance, I'm just using an example. The internet will freak out, but one thing I'd really love to see supported as part of the standard itself in IMAP or JMAP are avatars, some form of discovery of user avatars across different providers as truly part of the standard. I'm sure that if we look somewhere, there's somebody who's done something, but I think that would be a level up for email. And there's a lot of little things like that that I know the team has shared over the years that they'd like to see included in the standard. So this year we're going to start to do that work to engage in a better way, and then hopefully between the Thunderbird Council, who would be great representatives for us too, and our team, we can engage in a productive way with the different standards bodies. Does that answer the question, Phil?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. I think there's a bunch of very interesting ones out there. What about like emoji responses to emails? I know that Gmail has done a little bit on that. But yeah, like historically, Thunderbird has done a bunch of that. CalConnect, as you mentioned, Thunderbird has been a member for a while, or there's been some individual members in the Thunderbird community that have been joining as well, and it's really a great way to kind of explore new things. You get together with a bunch of people on that do calendar servers or other calendar clients, and maybe even just hack something together in that week on, hey, would this actually work? And it doesn't always have to end in a new feature in the product. But I think there's a bunch of good ideas in there, and we should definitely use that opportunity more to get in a room with vendors from other companies. And so this is kind of the open invitation, for anyone listening that's working on another email client or server. Doesn't matter if we're competitors in a way, what we really want to do, both of us or all of us, is have good email standards that we can build on and that we can use so that the nice, interesting things that we'd like to see in our products are usable across the ecosystem. We're doing a little bit of that as well in the email space. We're participating in the Make Better Email conference. There's a bunch of IETF mailing lists where we're at least reading, if not participating. The mail maintainers list and the email core list are two examples. So I think there's a lot of good opportunities that we should explore further this year.
One thing I'll finally add to that is uh, part of what Thunderbird's mission is, as agreed on multiple times throughout the years by our community, is to advance the standards and to be a good example of the standards in practice. And this is my 2 minutes to be the spiritual guru for the internet. These standards are really, really important. Having interoperability is critical for the internet to be the type of place that you want to be on. And we certainly don't want email to be like the chat landscape of today. So I see a comment. We are still part of CalConnect. And I'm not sure who's going to engage with them this year, if we've already made that decision. Go ahead, Toby.
Yeah, Magnus and I.
Okay. So Magnus and Toby are engaging with CalConnect. Are there any things that you guys have identified that you want to push for in those conversations?
Well, we're not so much pushing as supporting some of the suggested features. So implementing some of those features which might help further the standards that have been created is what we're under consideration and working on.
Gotcha. Yeah, we should make sure so a comment on the chat was, haven't seen much of that come through on planning mailing list. So we'll commit to trying to get back any updates on that to the mailing list, and as the year progresses, maybe we can also try to circle back in one of these and talk about any of the interesting conversations that have come out of engaging there.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'm hounding on this a little bit, but I think actually this is an interesting area where really anyone can join. If someone is out there interested in open standards and wants to help drive things forward and really try to play with a few of the cool things that are coming in as drafts. It doesn't need to be just MZLA. And like this is a great opportunity to try something out and get together and make something happen. All right, let's head on to the next question. So this is about services. As Thunderbird moves towards building an ecosystem that can serve as an ethical alternative to the more well-known online communication services, what is the expected timeline for the release of the Thunderbird Pro service?
Yeah. So for those who haven't kept up, once again, um, Thunderbird Pro are, uh, I guess you could call them web services that will be running that enhance Thunderbird, or in the case of Thundermail, that we'll be offering an email service. So you'll be able to get an email address at thundermail.com. And you don't have to use that just with Thunderbird. You can use it with any email client. And the question is, what's the timeline for those services being available? Right now, we have quite a few people already using Thunderbird Appointment, which is a calendar scheduling tool. So you can send someone a link and they can grab time in your calendar. The other services are Thunderbird Send, which is an end-to-end encrypted file sharing service. And then there's Thunderbird Assist, which is kind of in a friends and family alpha right now. And then Thundermail, which is in the same state. I run all my email through it, all my personal email, which is fun. I'm definitely, once again, sitting on the bleeding edge of what we're building and riding the dragon. So, but yeah, I expect that at the very least, we'll be inviting more and more of our invite list throughout the year. My hope, there's like a best case and worst case scenario. I think best case is that we would be able to open it up to the public before the end of the year. I don't know how realistic that is, but I expect us to at least have some sort of beta that folks can easily get into before the end of the year. And we've been pulling people in from the invite list. So if you go to thundermail.com, you can join that invite list. And we pull people in as we kind of open it up more and more to get feedback. But we're gradually pulling people in so that we have a manageable number of users and can scale over time. So I would say you could potentially get in the beta before the end of the year. And we'll see if we're able to get it out to everyone before the end of the year. That'd be a nice Christmas present. Is the service, another question here is the service also intended for business users? Eventually. Right now we're focused on individual users, but a ton of requests have been around team accounts, custom domains, which custom domains will support, we think we'll support on day one. But team accounts, that'll require some thinking from a product perspective of what's useful in that context. And right now we're just trying to get good at running an email service. And once we feel like we're reasonably good at that, we'll broaden that out a little bit.
Sounds good. I think that's a good answer. All right. Now that we're nearing the end of the hour, are there any questions from folks in the room that you want to add? If not, I'll add in one final question that came in a while ago in volume 3, but we didn't get to. Just wanted to give a short take on it. It's actually two related questions on mobile. The first one was how much, if any, of Thunderbird for Android is reusable for iOS, and are there plans to share some code? And the second one was why didn't we use Thunderbird Desktop as a base for mobile? If it wouldn't have been easier to, just make it responsive and then stick it into an app. I think there's a few parts to this. I'll start with the last one. Thunderbird Desktop is built on a very different platform. It's built for desktop with the performance characteristics of a desktop. It's been around for quite some time, where mobile wasn't a focus for really anyone in terms of like modern applications. So it's not as easy as just taking that code base and using it for mobile. You might say, well, there's Firefox for Android. Why can't we just use that code base? I think that's a decision that was made a while ago, before we acquired K9 Mail. That could have been a future. We could have said, okay, let's build something on top of Firefox or Android. One thing that we've seen on desktop a lot is that something breaks in the platform and we have to run behind that for quite some time. And there's, certainly that downside there as well. If we build on the mobile code base, we'd have to have those same constraints of Firefox changed something. Now we need to take care of this as well. So at the time the decision was made, okay, let's go the safe bet. There's an app out here that gives us a ready-made code base that has a lot of the features without starting that from scratch. So we went with that decision. And then kind of to head over to iOS land, here's where we're actually building something new. So we have this opportunity to, really design it in a very modern way. So it might be obvious to say, okay, let's take some pieces of Thunderbird for Android. Now, iOS and Android, there's completely different languages and code bases being used here. iOS uses Swift usually, and Android uses Kotlin, so different programming languages. There's a few opportunities that we're also using to make parts of it available. There's a thing called Kotlin multi-platform, which essentially allows you to write something in Kotlin, the language for Android, and then reuse that component in iOS through a series of translations that this platform uses. And that will be very useful for a lot of the backend things. Since Thunderbird for Android was really built for just itself, we can't just magically take one of the components, stick it into Kotlin multi-platform and use it for iOS. We need to do some more deliberate planning on, what does this component look like and what are the interfaces that we might need between code. So that will take a little bit more planning to figure out. But the way we'd like to build this on iOS is essentially, take a component that should probably be shared, and even if we don't share it right this moment, we build it as if we were, and then it's working for iOS. And then there might be a day in the future where we say, okay, these 10 components that we built, it looks like we could kind of take them all, put some glue code around it, and put that into Thunderbird for Android, replacing some of the more legacy code that has accumulated. So that's kind of the dream world plan, that we can build these shared components based on iOS with Kotlin multi-platform, and then later on reuse them in Android.
Yeah, there's one more thing I would add there, Philip, which is I remember when we had conversations about bringing K9 into the family, and we want to share with the world that, this conversation, this piece came up a number of times, and it was happening before I ever even came around. And so it was not a short discussion to get to where we arrived. My own thoughts, which I was a council member at the time, but also was the one who engaged with Ketty, who was running the K9 project at the time as our representative, is that there is something too that's really nice about having a native app to the platform. I think that just buys you a lot of performance and integration that's really hard to do as well with a app built on a different toolkit, or that's not really a native toolkit for the platform. And so I think we've made the right decision. I know the internet could argue about that, ad nauseum, but I really do think we'll do a great service to our users on like iOS, for instance, by bringing them something that feels native and feels like it's a part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. I see Luna has a question in the chat. It can be interesting to know if there's any Android translations that could be reused for iOS. Todd, I see you already answered that, but maybe for the video, do you want to repeat that?
Sure. In addition to like functionality and a lot of the logic that can be shared. Things like translations absolutely will be shared. The user interface, we expect to be like, we're targeting the same user experience for iOS and Android, even though we're starting from different places. So, I mean, we expect the vast majority of labels, buttons, anything that would be localized to be shared from the same repo, same translations. And then there will probably be just a small glossary for each platform of, specific to Android things, settings that don't exist on one platform but still need labels, things like that. But yeah, we do expect to share all of that work.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. So I guess we're heading towards the end. Thank you everyone for joining and giving us so many cool questions to answer. Really enjoyed this one. And looking forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you so much, Toby, for walking us through that. And thank you, Phil, for running the meeting.
Thank you both.
Thank you as well.
Thanks all.